My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, then manipulated me into signing over the $300, $0 inheritance to her during the divorce, only for her to secretly sell the family house and disappear with the money. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be one of those guys telling a story about how his wife cheated on him and stole everything, but here I am. Honestly, I still can't believe it's real. It all started with small signs, things I brushed off at first. Amanda, my wife, had always been a little bitchy when things didn't go her way, but lately she'd been acting weird. She'd come home late, excuse herself with vague stories about work or her friends. I noticed her phone was glued to her hand more than usual, and she'd get defensive if I tried to look at it. I thought maybe she was just stressed or having an affair with her job, but I didn't have proof. Then, about 2 months ago, I started noticing her spending more time with the neighbor, Mark. He's a good-looking guy, always hanging around the house, helping with yard work or fixing things. The thing is, I didn't think much of it at first. I figured they were just friends. But then I caught her sneaking out at night, and I saw her get into Mark's truck once when I was leaving for work. My gut told me something was off. I remember feeling this strange knot forming in my stomach, but I kept telling myself I was just paranoid. One day, I accidentally found her phone unguarded on the kitchen table. I saw a string of texts between her and Mark. At first, I thought it was innocent, maybe just friendly banter. But then I saw the words, "I can't wait to see you tonight," and my stomach sank. I scrolled further and found explicit messages, pictures of her in bed with him, and even a plan to meet up that very night. That was the moment I realized she had been lying to my face for months. She'd been sneaking around, lying about where she was, and pretending to everything I thought she was. I felt like my world was crashing down. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this after everything we built? I confronted her that same night. I took her phone and showed her the messages. Her reaction was a mixture of anger and denial. She called me paranoid, called me crazy, said I was imagining things. She even told me I was overreacting, that it was just sex, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew better. I knew she was lying. I saw her guilty face, her trembling hands. I knew she'd been lying to me for months. That moment I felt a rage I'd never experienced before. Betrayal cuts deep, but betrayal after betrayal, that's a different level. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. I wanted to believe she was innocent, but the evidence was right there, staring me in the face. I remember feeling this strange numbness, like I was watching everything happen from outside my own body. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. I didn't even know what I wanted to say or do. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in this lie anymore. After that confrontation, I started digging into her phone more, looking for anything I might have missed. I found texts from her mother, talking about how Amanda was planning to manipulate me into signing over the inheritance, $300, we'd gotten from my late father. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I was furious. Not only had she been cheating on me, but she was also scheming to take everything I had. The inheritance, our house, everything. I realized she was a manipulative bitch who'd do anything to get what she wanted. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about everything, about how I'd trusted her, loved her, how she'd lied to my face, used me, and now she was planning to screw me over financially. The worst part, I knew she'd deny everything, lie her way out, and probably try to turn the situation around on me. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had to figure out what to do next. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after what I'd seen and uncovered. The betrayal was too deep. But I also knew I had to be smart about this. If she was willing to manipulate me into signing over the money, she'd likely try to do the same with the house or worse. So I started making plans. I contacted a lawyer, gathered evidence, and thought about how to protect myself. I didn't want to just kick her out and be done. I wanted justice, and I wanted her to pay for what she'd done. I had a feeling that this wasn't just about cheating. It was about her greed and her manipulative nature. I knew I'd have to be careful. She was smart, and I didn't trust her not to lie her way out of everything. The shock, the anger, the feeling of betrayal, it all hit me hard. I'd trusted her with my life, my heart, my money, and she'd used it all against me. That's where I am now, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to understand how I got here, and figuring out what comes next. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust again, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to let her get away with stealing from me. Not anymore. After I found out about the affair and the inheritance scheme, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't focus on anything else. My mind kept circling back to the betrayal. Amanda, my wife, had always been a little high maintenance, but I never thought she'd turn into this manipulative, lying piece of work. She's always been the kind of woman who acts like she's better than everyone else. Bitchy, entitled, and always with a sharp tongue. But now she was something worse, a liar and a thief. I started digging deeper. I hired a private investigator just to confirm what I already suspected, that she was sneaking around with Mark. I needed proof, not just of the affair, but also of her plans to manipulate me financially. I pored over her bank statements, her emails, her texts. I wanted to see how far she'd go. It didn't take long. The pie came back with photos of her sneaking out late at night, meeting Mark in secret spots, and even slipping into his house when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd never felt so humiliated and angry in my life. How could she do this? How could the woman I loved and trusted betray me so openly? Once I had the evidence, I confronted her again. This time I wasn't going to play nice. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the manipulation, the plan to screw me out of the inheritance. Her face went pale, but she quickly recovered. She started lying again, saying it was just sex, that Mark was just a friend, that I was overreacting. She insisted I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I had her texts, her photos, her emails. I laid it all out. She tried to deny the inheritance part, but I had bank statements showing her transferring money from our joint account to her sister's account, claiming it was for expenses. But I knew better. She'd been planning to sell the house and disappear with the cash. That's when I realized she'd been manipulating me from the start. She convinced me to sign over the inheritance during our divorce settlement, claiming it was for our future. But secretly, she'd already sold the house behind my back. I'd been blind to her true nature all along. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. How could I have been so stupid? I trusted her to the very end, and she'd used that trust to screw me over. The emotional impact hit me hard. I was furious, but also deeply hurt. I'd built a life with her, shared everything, money, dreams, even a future. And she'd thrown it all away for a piece of ass and quick cash. I remember sitting in our living room, staring at the wall, feeling numb. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? I'd always been a straightforward guy, honest, hardworking, loyal, and she was the exact opposite. She lied, cheated, manipulated. And worse, she lied about the biggest thing of all, her love for me. In the days that followed, I started feeling a strange mix of emotions. I was angry, yes, but also betrayed. I'd always believed that honesty was the foundation of a relationship, and now I saw how flimsy that foundation really was. I felt stupid for trusting her, for thinking she was the woman I married. But I also felt a flicker of clarity. I couldn't keep living in this nightmare. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't want to make rash decisions. I needed a plan, something that would hurt her back, something that would make her regret ever crossing me. I decided I'd get legal advice first. I needed to know exactly what my rights were, especially since she'd already started selling the house and transferring money. I found a good divorce lawyer, someone who specialized in financial fraud and manipulative spouses. I told him everything about the affair, the inheritance, the house sale, the lying. He warned me that I'd have to act fast if I wanted to recover any of the money or keep the house. Otherwise, she'd be gone with everything. I started noticing how her attitude shifted once I confronted her with the evidence. She became more bitchy, more aggressive. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of being paranoid, and blame me for all of it. She called me controlling, jealous, insecure. But I knew better. I knew she was the liar and manipulator here. I started to see her for what she really was, a selfish, greedy woman who would do anything to get what she wanted. I realized I'd wasted years trusting her when I should have been watching her more carefully. That's when I decided I needed to fight back. I wasn't going to let her get away with stealing from me. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could, records of her bank transfers, her texts with Mark, her emails scheming about the house sale. I wanted to make sure I had enough to prove her guilt in court. I also started thinking about what I'd do if she tried to run with the money or hide the house. I contacted a real estate agent, just in case she tried to sell it secretly. I wanted to be prepared for everything. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. I loved her once. I thought we had a future, a life together. Now it was all falling apart. I kept replaying all the moments we shared, all the promises she broke, all the lies she told. It hurt more than I can put into words. The betrayal cut so deep that I wondered if I'd ever trust anyone again. But I also knew I had to move on for my own sanity. I had to take control of the situation before she wiped me out completely. So, here I am in the middle of this chaos trying to piece my life back together. I've realized that sometimes the person you love the most can turn out to be the biggest liar and thief. And the worst part, she's still out there, probably planning her next move. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know one thing. I won't let her destroy me. I'll fight for what's mine and make sure she pays for what she's done. That's all I can do right now. After I gathered all the evidence, every text, every bank transfer, every suspicious email, I started feeling the full weight of what I was dealing with. Amanda, my wife, had turned out to be not just a lying cheat but a master manipulator willing to burn everything down for her own selfish ends. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. I had trusted her with my life, with my money, with our future. And she'd used that trust to manipulate me into signing over the inheritance, knowing full well she was planning to sell the house and run off with the cash. I remembered the day I signed those papers for the divorce settlement. She had begged, cried, said she'd change, that she loved me, bullshit, all of it. I was so blinded by love and hope that I didn't see the trap she was setting. I signed, thinking I was doing what was best for us, only to find out later she'd already sold the family house behind my back. I felt like an idiot. I'd been played for a fool, and I'd handed her a blank check to do whatever she wanted. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer, a sharp guy named Steve who specialized in financial crimes and manipulative spouses. I laid everything out, proof of her affair, her plans to sell the house, the inheritance scheme, her attempt to manipulate me into signing over everything. Steve told me I had a strong case, but I'd need to be quick. If she disappeared with the money, I might never see a dime of what I was owed. The house was the main concern now, especially since she'd already started the process of selling it. I also hired a private investigator again, just to keep tabs on her. I didn't trust her to stay put or tell the truth. Turns out she was smart. She'd already hidden some of the money in a secret account, and she'd been funneling it into offshore accounts. I found out she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. My blood boiled. The woman I'd loved and trusted was now just a con artist, a thief, a liar. I started feeling this strange mix of rage and sadness. I was angry at her for betraying me, for lying and cheating and scheming behind my back. But I was also sad because I realized I'd lost the woman I once thought was my partner. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd hoped to grow old with, she was gone, replaced by someone cold, manipulative, and greedy. It was a brutal realization. And then the next shock hit me. I found out that she'd been telling her friends and family that I was abusive, that I'd been controlling and jealous, that I'd driven her to cheat. That was her way of spinning the story, trying to turn everyone against me. I knew she'd do anything to cover her tracks, to make herself look innocent. I felt sick. I'd always been honest, straightforward. What I got in return was lies, betrayal, and theft. By this point, I was completely fed up. I couldn't let her get away with this. I decided I'd fight her legally, but I also wanted to make her regret crossing me. I started planning my revenge, not in some petty way, but in a way that would hit her where it hurts: her pride, her reputation, her ability to manipulate others. I knew she'd try to deny everything, lie her way out, and probably try to blame me for everything. But I had the proof. I had all the evidence I needed. I also started thinking about the money. That $300, $0 inheritance was supposed to be our safety net, a cushion for our future. Instead, she'd manipulated me into giving her control of it, and now she'd already sold the house and run off with the cash. I needed to get that money back, or at least prevent her from disappearing with it completely. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in asset recovery. We discussed freezing her accounts, subpoenaing her phone records, tracking her movements. I was determined to get my share back, even if it meant going to court and fighting her tooth and nail. Meanwhile, Amanda's attitude got bitchier. She started throwing tantrums, accusing me of being paranoid, jealous, controlling, just like she'd been spinning her web. She'd deny everything, even when I presented her with proof. She'd call me a crazy stalker, say I was ruining her reputation, that I was the one who was unstable. But I knew the truth. I knew she was the one lying, scheming, and stealing. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the desperation. She was trying to cover her tracks, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I also began to realize how much I'd been blinded by love. I'd given her everything, my trust, my heart, my money, and she'd used it against me. It was a harsh lesson, but I was learning fast. I couldn't fix this by myself, so I relied on my lawyer, the pie, and my own instincts. I started documenting everything, preparing for the inevitable showdown. I knew she'd fight me hard, probably try to manipulate the court, spin stories, or even try to disappear with the money. But I was ready. I'd made up my mind. I was going to fight for what was mine, and I was going to make her pay for what she'd done. Looking back, I realize how naive I was to trust her so completely. She was a master at lies and manipulation, and she'd used that to her advantage. But now I was awake. I saw her for what she truly was, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. This wasn't just about money or a house. It was about respect, trust, and my own dignity. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I was determined to turn things around. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I knew I couldn't let her win. Not this time. The more I dug into Amanda's schemes, the more I realized how deep her deception went. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. I found out she'd been meeting with shady characters, offshore account managers, and even some sketchy real estate agents. Every move she made was calculated, designed to cut me out of the picture and leave me with nothing. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. How could she do this? How could she turn our life into a game to be manipulated? For her own benefit. One night, I caught her trying to transfer the last of the money into a hidden account. I'd set up alerts on her phone and bank accounts after finding out about her secret offshore dealings. When I saw her attempt to move the funds, I sprang into action. I called my lawyer immediately, showed him the proof, and we got a court order to freeze all her assets. That was a huge win. It meant she couldn't access the money anymore. But I knew she'd find a way to fight back, to lie her way out of this mess. Meanwhile, I started putting together a plan to expose her fully. I wanted everyone to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, greedy liar who'd burn everything down just to get her hands on money. I reached out to her friends and family, told them what I'd uncovered, and warned them to be cautious. I didn't want her to spin her web any further or manipulate others into siding with her. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace her financial moves. I wanted to prove she'd been stealing from me and planning to disappear with the inheritance. Amanda, of course, was furious. She threw tantrums, accused me of trying to ruin her, and insisted I was the one cheating and lying. She'd scream that I was controlling and paranoid, that I had trust issues, but I had all the proof. I'd seen her texts, her emails, her bank transfers. She was the one lying, scheming, and sneaking around, and I was done playing her game. I told her she could spin her stories all she wanted, but the truth was out now. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. One day, I caught her packing her bags, trying to leave with what little she hadn't already sold or hidden. That was the moment I knew I had to act fast. I called the police, just to have a record of her trying to flee with stolen property. They arrived, and I explained everything. She was furious, shouting, calling me names, but the police told her she was not going anywhere until the court decided what to do. That was a small victory, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. She was smart. she'd probably find another way out, another loophole. In the meantime, I was working with my lawyer on the next steps. We filed for an emergency injunction to stop her from selling or transferring the house. We also subpoenaed her financial records, her emails, her phone logs. I wanted to build a solid case to prove she'd been lying, stealing, and scheming. I also contacted a real estate agent to prepare for the possibility that she might try to sell the house secretly. I couldn't let her disappear with everything I'd worked for. The emotional toll was enormous. I trusted her with everything, and she'd betrayed me so completely. I kept replaying our past, wondering where I went wrong. How did I not see the signs? Why did I believe her when she said she loved me? It was hard to accept that the woman I married was capable of such deception, such cold manipulation. I felt stupid, angry, and heartbroken all at once. But I knew I couldn't let her win. I had to be strong for myself, for what was left of my dignity. I also started to think about how to rebuild my life after this. The house was in limbo now, and my inheritance was at risk. I could trust anyone anymore, especially not her. I had to put everything into protecting myself legally, financially, and emotionally. I found some support groups online, people who'd gone through similar betrayals. Talking to them helped me realize I wasn't alone and that I could get through this, even if it felt impossible right now. But the worst part, I knew this wasn't just about money or the house. It was about trust, love, and the betrayal of everything I believed in. I'd loved her, committed to her, and she turned out to be someone I didn't even recognize anymore. I kept asking myself if I could ever forgive her if I wanted to. Right now, I was just focused on stopping her from destroying what little I had left. I had to protect what was mine and make sure she paid for her lies. I didn't want her to walk away scot-free with my money and my life shattered. Not on my watch. The legal battle was brutal. Every day brought a new obstacle, a new lie from Amanda, or a new attempt to manipulate the system. She was relentless, trying to spin stories, claiming she was the victim that I was, trying to ruin her reputation. But I had the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, witness testimonies, that painted a clear picture of her deception. My lawyer, Steve, was a bulldog, pushing hard to get the court to freeze her assets completely and prevent her from selling the house. One afternoon, we finally got a court date set. The judge was stern, and I laid out everything: her affair, her plans to sell the house, the inheritance scheme, her secret offshore accounts. Amanda's lawyer tried to argue that she was acting in good faith, that I was trying to ruin her, but the judge wasn't buying it. The court issued a preliminary injunction blocking her from transferring or selling any property or assets connected to the estate. It was a relief, but I knew it was just the beginning. Amanda was already scheming, probably trying to find a loophole or another way out. Meanwhile, I was also working on the emotional side. I'd been crushed, betrayed, and humiliated. I'd loved her once, and now I barely recognized the woman sitting across from me in court. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for thinking that love could conquer greed and lies. I started seeing a therapist just to keep my head clear. Talking to someone who understood betrayal helped me process some of the pain, the anger, and the confusion. I knew I had to stay strong for myself, for the little bit of dignity I had left. One night, I found out she'd been trying to contact her old friends, trying to gather support or maybe find someone to help her hide the money. I discovered her trying to open new offshore accounts, even attempting to wire some of the stolen inheritance into a foreign bank. That was the breaking point. I immediately informed my lawyer, and we worked with the courts to issue a warrant for her arrest if she tried to flee the country. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not after everything. I also started setting up plans to get the house back. I hired a real estate agent, ready to buy her out or take over if she tried to sell it secretly. I wanted to make sure that if she disappeared, I'd at least have some control. I contacted the bank, arranged to have the mortgage frozen, and demanded a full accounting of every dollar. She'd moved. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply she'd been scheming. She was a master manipulator, but I was learning her game. I'll admit it was exhausting. Every day I felt like I was fighting a war mentally, emotionally, financially. I'd start the mornings feeling hopeful, then by afternoon I'd be overwhelmed with anger and despair. I'd look at old photos of us, wonder where I went wrong. How did I miss the signs? How could she lie so effortlessly? It was a roller coaster, and I was strapped in for the ride, knowing I had to stay the course. But amidst all the chaos, I also started to see some small victories. The court's injunction was a win. The evidence I'd gathered was solid. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case. I realized that I was not powerless, even if it felt like everything was falling apart. I was taking control, piece by piece, and refusing to let her destroy what little I had left. I was learning how to stand my ground, how to fight for what was rightfully mine. And then came the moment I never expected. Amanda, desperate and cornered, tried to reach out one last time. She sent me a message claiming she was sorry, that she loved me, and that she'd change if I'd just give her another chance. Honestly, I felt nothing but disgust. I saw through her tears, her lies, her manipulations. I realized I was done with her games. I told her she had no right to ask for forgiveness after what she'd done. I told her I was done being her victim, and that I'd fight to the bitter end to get my money, my house, and my dignity back. That was the turning point. I knew I couldn't fix what she'd broken, but I could fight to make sure she paid for her betrayal. I'd come to terms with the fact that I'd lost the woman I loved, but I hadn't lost myself. I was stronger than her lies, more resilient than her schemes. I was finally ready to take back control and put an end to her manipulations. The battle wasn't over yet, but I was determined to win. I owed that much to myself, to the man I used to be before she ruined everything. The final phase of this nightmare was the court hearing that decided everything. I sat there, watching Amanda try her last-ditch tactics, pleading, crying, spinning stories about how she was the real victim. But I had the evidence, and I knew the truth. The judge listened carefully, and in the end, he ruled in my favor. The court froze her assets completely, ordered her to return the stolen inheritance, and issued a warrant for her arrest if she tried to leave the country. The house was awarded back to me, and the sale Amanda had planned was halted indefinitely. I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The battle was over, at least for now. Amanda was gone, disappeared after the court's decision, probably trying to escape the consequences. I learned she'd already sold some valuables, but the court ordered her to pay damages for her deception and theft. The legal process was exhausting, but it was also a relief to finally see justice being served. I knew I'd never get back what I lost, my trust, my peace of mind, the years I thought we had, but at least I could start piecing my life back together. In the aftermath, I moved into a small apartment, far from the chaos and betrayal of my former life. I sold the house at a loss, but that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was free from her manipulations. I finally felt like I could breathe again, like I'd been holding my breath for months. I cut ties with her family and her friends, realizing they'd been duped just as much as I had. I didn't need anyone's pity or judgment. I just needed to focus on healing myself. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from all this. Trust is fragile, and people can hide their true selves behind a mask of charm and love. Never again will I ignore the signs of manipulation or greed. I also learned that revenge isn't about petty payback. It's about standing up for yourself, protecting what's yours, and making sure the guilty face the consequences. Amanda's actions cost her everything: her marriage, her reputation, her freedom. And honestly, I don't feel sorry for her. She brought this on herself. Most importantly, I've come to see that I'm stronger than I thought. Betrayal hurts like hell, but it also teaches you resilience. I've started rebuilding my life slowly, trusting again, but with more caution. I still have scars, but I refuse to let them define me. I want others to know that even in the darkest moments, there's a way out. You just have to be willing to fight for it. So this is my story. It's raw, it's real, and it's messy. I hope sharing it helps someone out there who's going through something similar. Trust is precious, and betrayal cuts deep, but you can come out of it stronger. Never underestimate your own strength, and never let someone manipulate or steal from you without consequences. Life's too short to let a liar and a thief win.